Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. What next for Deontay Wilder? That really is a question in the wake of a second successive loss and pretty poor performance overall against Zhang Jilei and previously Joseph Parker. And now that he's got 4 losses on his record, people are asking the question, should he retire? Should he continue? And if he continues, can he have success in the heavyweight division? And I guess with all things in the heavyweight division, sometimes it comes down to management and matchmaking. But let's face it, if you're on the Saudi money train right now and you're an elite heavyweight or someone who's in the top 20 who's getting a fight in Saudi Arabia or on the Saudi Arabian cards, which are obviously now also going further afield like Los Angeles, well, you're going to be matched tough. Your management, your promoter is going to have less say in terms of who you're matched with because they want to make strong fights. Fights that people see as competitive, 50-50, the sort of fights that we always wanted but hardly ever got. Getting a 50-50 fight for quite a few years, and actually I guess in boxing in general, can sometimes be, a very elusive unicorn. But with the money coming in from the Saudis, certainly we've been getting it. And Deontay Wilder, the back end of his career, you could say he's either cashing in or cashing out, and it kind of hasn't worked for him in Saudi Arabia. But he is 38, he is injury prone, he's probably well past his best at this point. But I think people thought he would put in better efforts than he has. But just because, a big puncher, but just seemingly can't pull the trigger. The best of Deontay Wilder against Zhang was in that final round where for about 20 seconds or so he decided he was going to actually let his right hand go. And he looked a little bit dangerous, but then obviously got clipped with a glancing right hook, started staggering off and inextricably seemed to say something to the ref, which certainly has been a talking point from fans after the fight. And as we know, he got dropped because he had spun himself around and did not protect himself. But the what next? Because the obvious answer would be retire. Sail off into the sunset. You've got your tens of millions of dollars from the Saudi Arabian fights and obviously with the Tyson Fury fights, all that sort of stuff. And I'm not going to go into some of the other bits and pieces with his career, the previous stuff, the stuff he's missed out on, because that's not this sort of video. It's the what next. I've done more of a sort of, maybe not a career obit as such, but I guess looking at Deontay Wilder and some other bits and pieces, the legacy discussion. I've done a video on Patreon discussing some of that type of stuff. But it is easy to forget that boxing is a sport where it's fine margins. And if you decline, if you're not at your peak anymore, you can become so much beatable. And I think with Deontay Wilder, we find ourselves in that position. The once very dangerous and fearsome puncher is struggling to pull the trigger and obviously far more beatable. At a certain point, Zhang, didn't seem to have the fear that a lot of other fighters have had in the past. He was respectful early on, trying to figure out Wilder, get the range, starting to ramp up, and obviously he landed in round 5 in that one, and it was all she wrote. So if he was to continue, if he continues instead of, because I think the character of Deontay Wilder is such that he will, and a lot of boxers do, they are somewhat delusional about their losses. They will find reasons to blame others, or something didn't happen, or the preparation wasn't right for X, Y, Z. They will try to find a way to minimize their performance and put stock into something else to blame the loss on. And I don't think Deontay Wilder's going to, with the very big and obvious ego that he's shown in his career, he doesn't want to retire on a couple of poor performances. That would be my bet. I mean, there's a number of fighters that we've seen recently that just keep going too long, and they want to keep winning. They want to go out on a win. Adam Kovnarski is one of those, who clearly is a shot fighter, but he just won't retire. He keeps continuing. He's still got the drive and the will, thinks there's more to give. And I think Deontay Wilder, and you consider all the money that would be on offer, if the Saudis are still interested in Wilder being on the scene and having him in a fight, he can still make boatloads of money even if there is another loss coming. But I think the character of Deontay Wilder, he will not want to stop. I think he will want to go out at least on his terms, not with a knockout in Saudi Arabia, 2 back-to-back losses, because he won't want to go out that way. I think that's just the reality of it. But if he continues to fight and if he's matched tough, I think there will be another loss in the offing, especially if it's powerful heavyweights or young up-and-comers that can box well, they can move well. Deontay Wilder has never necessarily been the hardest to outbox, but obviously there was always that threat. The right hand, he delivered it well, he was able to stop a lot of fighters, but seemingly that element of his game is gone. And I guess if he continues, does he stay with Malik Scott? That really is a question, because Malik Scott, is a boxer at heart. He's tried to implement some of what he used to do for Deontay Wilder's game, but I think it's an old dog, new trick situation where Deontay Wilder will just revert to type, and we've seen that as well. I mean, some of the way that he fought against Young was the way that he fought against Luis Ortiz 4 or 5 years ago. Against some of those big punches, dangerous guys, he wants to, stay at range for the most part, stay out of danger, and then look for his opportunities. But he just can't seem to either find or create those opportunities like he could in the past. And when you're consistently up against the best guys as well, it's obviously going to be tough as well. Certainly earlier in his career, Deontay Wilder did have what I would have always deemed sort of middling meat opposition prior to sort of Ortiz and Tyson Fury. Prior to those guys, it was a lot of forgettable names that we didn't necessarily want to see. But if you're at the top level, competing consistently against different styles and power levels and skill levels, it's tough to stay undefeated. And at the back end of his career, when he's clearly declined, it's going to become even harder for Deontay Wilder to stay relevant against the top guys, especially if he can't land the right hand. But what next if he stays? And should he stay with Malik Scott? And I guess one quick thought, I should say. I think the best version of Deontay Wilder was around 2018, 2019, and you could argue he showed some of that of his best in the Tyson Fury fights, and arguably did he leave some of himself behind in the ring from that trilogy? I think so. I think that took a lot out of him. But I think the best version of Deontay Wilder included Mark Breland in the corner. And I think people forget Breland added a lot of value. But obviously, as Breland has said in the past, Deontay Wilder didn't want to listen, thought he knew best, didn't want to do road work, didn't want to take instruction. He fell in love with his own legend and believed that his power would always get him out of jail, especially if he was down in a fight. And to a certain point, against certain opponents, yeah, it could. But as we've seen, he's fallen short more in recent times, especially as physically he's declined. And after the age of 35, it's harder to be at that peak physical condition. I always say the best work of heavyweights is generally before the age of 35. There's exceptions, but the best work generally is before that age. Deontay Wilder is the wrong side of 35, 38, long laundry list of injuries, and he's not going to get any better. It's kind of diminishing returns from here on out. But I think the best version of him was working with Mark Breland, a tall, gangly fighter who was a very good fighter in his own right, champion, and who had a lot of attributes similar to Wilder in terms of lanky, big power. But I don't see that sort of link up coming back together at all, given some of what Deontay Wilder said after the Tyson Fury rematch. The stuff that he laid into Breland about throwing in the towel and all this sort of stuff, and that he was trying to, snake in the camp, all that sort of stuff. But does Malik Scott need to step back, or was he just a scapegoat at this point? I think Deontay Wilder, for the last 3 or 4 years, is arguably just who he is at this point. But he's getting worse, because obviously Father Time undefeated. And I remember JD's always used to say, they used to do this every 6 months or so. Was he better than the previous 6 months? That version of it. And I don't think they'd be getting the sort of the thumbs up on that sort of answer or that sort of test right now. But if he continues, Jared Anderson, Jarrell Miller, Andy Ruiz Jr., Jermaine Franklin, these are all potential names. They were talking about Anderson and Wilder potentially for the Los Angeles card. I said ahead of the fight, even if Wilder lost, potentially he still could end up facing Anderson. Maybe the Saudis, who are probably got a vested interest at this point with, you've had the likes of Wilder, Joshua, Fury, Usyk at the top of the tree for a considerable amount of time, and you're going to think of other heavyweights who are a little bit older as well. You do have a situation where some of these guys are going to be out of the sport, in the next couple of years. The Saudis probably are aware of this, and if they've got a time horizon where they want to be involved with heavyweight boxing and boxing more broadly, they've got to also help develop some of the next level of stars. And arguably, they've been doing that in Saudi Arabia. Agit Kabayel's star has been on the rise. But I think his appeal potentially could be limited because he's fighting out of Germany. No one's necessarily queuing up for him in terms of a casual boxing public sense. But in terms of Jared Anderson, who could be, potentially the next big American heavyweight star, if you were to have him to knock out Deontay Wilder in front of an American audience, that really could be the making of his star. And other matchups, like, as I mentioned, I think if they were to throw Jarrell Miller with Deontay Wilder, I think potentially that's a tough style matchup for Deontay Wilder. Andy Ruiz Jr., I think, that's a fight that should have happened a couple of years ago. Maybe that's the best of the bunch because Wilder, with his length, could stay at range and limit some of the opportunities because Ruiz, a front foot counterpuncher, works off what you give him. Wilder would be very economical, would starve him of opportunities. And there's other names, Jermaine Franklin, Michael Hunter, there's other Americans that could potentially be in the fold. But we'll have to see what happens. But if he stays on, it's probably going to be what we consider 50-50s, or maybe he's going to be the underdog from here on out, given what we've seen. Should he stay with Malik Scott? Who knows what he will do? Maybe he will, at this point, go, well, do I just need someone, maybe not Scott, maybe, an assistant to help him tick over, be a pseudo trainer, but Wilder basically is going to do what Wilder wants to do. And largely he's done that a decent chunk of his career. But if he stays on and he loses, there are questions about does it hurt his legacy? And certainly there have been quite a few who've come out saying, and it feeds into the narrative, these losses, that they're saying that he's never been any good. But I think, Deontay Wilder has been a good heavyweight. Maybe he hasn't been the best of his generation as he claimed and, best of all time and all that. I mean, that starts to look pretty laughable now. But at a certain point, he was a good heavyweight, strong heavyweight, feared heavyweight in terms of the punching power. But the mystique, it's gone. And certainly he needs to pull the trigger if he wants to stay, have any skerrick of relevancy in the heavyweight division. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.